So this is very difficult to do it as a class. I don't even know how to. I mean, I gave a class last week. I don't know if anybody watched. Any of you see it? There it was more. It was focused on a certain process that I thought was important. But I want to talk both about the psychological side of it and the emotional side of it, of everything we've gone through. So first of all, it takes time to understand that we all went through, or we're still going through it. Doesn't everybody's in a different spot on this journey. We all went through a trauma, and the reason I'm calling it a trauma, and I don't like that word trauma in general, because we weren't alive. I don't think anybody here was alive to see pogroms, and so that's like sort of like in our distant past. And I at least have always stayed away from Yad Vashem. I've never gone there. For a lot of reasons. And then when you suddenly you see evil of this type, then it does exactly what it wants to do to you, which is it destroys your faith in life. That's really what it's meant to do, and that's what it does. That's what it's meant to do. That's what they try to do, and I want to get deeper into that feeling of what that exactly that means. But human being needs a certain level of, I talk about Maslow's pyramid of needs, but and the real basis is security. But he almost doesn't at all talk about what we call psychological security. And psychological security means that you have a certain expectancy. It's expectations, which we've talked so much about. You have a certain expectation about what life is supposed to be like. You take into account the fact that there are accidents, and even in Israel, you take into account that there are sporadic acts of terror, or call them whatever you want. When you walk in New York, or especially, in the 80s, if you walked in New York or Washington, D.C., so you took into account the fact that they could be, you could be murdered. It could happen, but these things are very. They don't. For most people, they don't destroy their sense of security in life. And what they did, and what they meant to do, which is much more than what they did, was to make us feel isolated, each one in our own inner world, with our fears and with especially this sense of insecurity that life has no meaning because it can be so brutally destroyed. Now, there is a certain point where I don't know how there's a lot that's been written about Holocaust survivors and how they went on with their lives. How did they exactly do that? How did they rebuild something? But what is common to everything is that you can't. There is no real way to process something like this. You don't. There's no processing. Like it's sort of like there's like a person who lives at the edge of a cliff, and you just don't go. You don't get close to it. That's like the way that you somehow cope with this. And over time, you get used to the fact that there's a cliff there, and I know not to go there. I know not to walk in that direction. That's not going to lead anywhere good. And so you feel this understanding, and I think that has now been etched into everyone's. I think 99% or maybe 95% of the people in this country, at least, probably another 80% of Jews in the world. There's been like a cliff, like created, like within our psyche. Like this is like a place where you can't go there anymore. It's just not. It's not possible to go there. And what is this place? It's this place where the abyss has been opened, and you see that the abyss is complete chaos. It's not chaos in the sense of people running around in a train station, like wow, chaos. It's chaos in the sense that, like the ancient Greeks meant when they said chaos, that there is an abyss of chaos, which means complete annihilation of life. That's what it feels like. It's not something normal. And so that abyss has been opened inside of us. It's now open right now. And it takes a lot to cover it again. It takes a lot of time and a lot of life after something like that to cover it, but it's never fully covered, because now you know, it's like covered with one of these manholes or something. You know that the abyss is there. Now you know that this is something that exists. The sages say that for whatever reason, that is the recipe for tshuva. Not the tshuva of the individual. It's not talking about the tshuva in the individual. The individual doesn't need anything like this, anything even remotely near it to do tshuva. If Hashem wants to wake someone up, it's enough to give them, a traffic accident even, to wake them up, and they wake up. If he needs more, so a little bit more, and so on. This is nothing similar to that. The sages say that at the end of the exile, there will be a king whose decrees will be as harsh as Haman, and he will cause us to do tshuva. And again, they're not talking about personal tshuva. It's not about you or me. It's not the point. The point is the tshuva of the entire people. Now, one could argue, but when we were in 70, 80 years ago, did people do tshuva after the Holocaust? Did that actually work? Did anything change? So we'll get to that maybe later, but the point is that this is a very, very similar thing in the effect that it has, and I will want to say that this is actually, in some ways, it's even more powerful. Not that it's worse, but that it's more powerful. That the effect it has on the psyche is actually more powerful. And there's a lot of reasons for that, like why that is that way. And so what is this abyss that's opened up, this abyss? I don't want to talk about it too much, because I don't want that to be the topic, because everybody has it open in them now, and you got to figure out how to cover it. And you cover it with life. You cover it with trying to create something new. It says that there are two, let's call it an abyss and a heavens in every person's psyche. There's a part where I can completely lose my faith in life, but there's also the heavens above, which is another type of faith that is beyond reason. It's not logical, and it's a deep-rooted, deeply sourced faith in life. And it is just as powerful as the abyss, and they stand one against the other in every single person. They also stand one against the other in the world itself. Maybe we'll start with the world first, and then go into the psyche. In the world, the way that this was described is that there's Amalek and that there's Am Yisrael. And what do they represent? They represent these two extremes, these two poles of existence. There's two poles to existence. And here we're not talking about, this is a different system right now, then what we usually talk about there being three axes. Here there's like two poles. We're talking about something that's very dualistic. It's not, there's no middle ground here. There's nothing in the middle here. And these two poles are that there's a pole that is an illogical, steadfast faith in life, and the same thing, an illogical, steadfast faith, literally faith, in death. So it's death. I mean, it's not like this is something new. Everybody knows about Satan worshippers. What are Satan worshippers? Those are people, if they're not Hollywood Satan worshippers, if they're the actual thing. So what they deal in death, and that's what they want to create. They want to create actual inability to believe in life anymore. That's what they want. Because they don't believe in life, they believe in death. Now there's all kinds of ways that this is presented in
you don't have to go into all the different ways.
No, but I want you to understand some of them because it's very important. The one that's very important here is, and if you don't understand it, you don't know how to deal with this, is that my life only begins once I die. That is the Muslim version of it. Meaning, this life here that you see, this is nothing. And what really is life is going to start only after you kill me. You have to understand this. If the problem with the Western civilization is that they can't even begin to fathom this idea. They don't understand what this means. What does this mean in the psyche? It means that the person prefers to die. It's not just some kind of. And what do I mean by prefers to die? There's many ways to die. What he means is that he prefers to die in the act of increasing death in the world. That's how he wants his life to end. That's what they call a shaheed. That's really what they call it. And you can't, if you don't understand that psychology, then you can't understand what a suicide bomber is. But that's where it all comes from. It all comes from this faith that the whole point is to die. To create as much death as you can, and if you die doing it, you win. That's the greatest level. And you have to understand that there are hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of people who are like that. That's what they understand.
So it's not the whole Muslim world? No,
it's not the whole Muslim world, but that's the Muslim version of it. Okay? But there's enough people like that they have who to send. Why am I saying that it's so important to understand this? Because there is no way to get rid of this, because it's illogical. There's no way you can't in any way bargain with it. You can't. There's nothing you can do. The only thing someone like that might do is, like in the same way that I would maybe be able to control myself not to take a cookie to get 2 cookies later. So maybe they would be able to hold off for a little bit of time if they felt that this would allow them to create more death and mayhem later. But even that they usually can't. That's why you see stupid things like, sometimes you look at them and you see, there was only one person on the bus. Why did they, because the point is not just how many you killed. The point is that you finished it this way. And you have to understand that there is such human psychology. Now, it's a very important thing to understand. This is not animal psychology. There's no animal in the world that can think this way. That just doesn't exist in the wild. It's only human beings can come to this. And again, this is because there is that abyss that feels that everything that God created is terrible, and we have to destroy it. Now, I'm no expert on this. I don't know how it happened or why it happened, or there's a lot to discuss about it. But this was part of the ancient Iranian religion called Zoroastrianism.
Called what?
Zoroastrianism.
It's not Muslim.
It was long before the Muslim world. It's their basis. It's a dualistic picture of reality that there is, and Chazal talk about it a lot in the Talmud, that there are two gods who are fighting each other, and you have to take a side. You're either going to be with the God of light, or the God of darkness, the God of life, or the God of death. How it came about, was it always like this? These are all very interesting questions. We could talk a lot about it, but it's not relevant right now. The reason I'm saying this is that twofold. One is that you have to understand what we're facing technically, like practically, to know what needs to be done. So when the Torah identifies this way of thinking as Amalek, that's what it identifies as Amalek. People think Amalek is some kind of people that they lived somewhere and they this and they that. The Torah has many, many ways to describe things. Unfortunately, too few words and many things that it wants to describe. And so this thing called Amalek has two different variations to it. In the same way that we'll see in a second that Yiddishkeit has two different variations to it in the eyes of the sages also. The one is that there is a family, an actual pedigree of the grandson of Esau who became Amalek. And they were a nation that once existed, which does not exist anymore. There's no such nation anymore. As far as we know, there's nothing left from them. So the other side of it is that there is also, again, what the sages identified was a philosophy of life, or rather of death. And this is something is like a brain virus that spreads. It's like a brain cancer that spreads in the world. So when we say the Nazis were Amalek, we don't mean that they somehow were connected to this family called Amalek from 3,000 years ago, which don't exist anymore. What we mean is that this cancer spread into their minds, and there's a reason why it happened there. They were susceptible to it. People are more susceptible to this type of thinking than people who are less susceptible. Most of the Muslim world is not so susceptible to this type of thinking. But in Iran, they're very susceptible to it. And they find the people who are sick like them. They figure out where are the places that we can spread this type of cancer. To a certain degree, people saw this cancer spread already in 1941 and 42, when there was a famous meeting between Rommel, who was the head of the Nazi forces in North Africa, and the Mufti of Yerushalayim, the head Muslim preacher who wasn't a Shiite, who wasn't from Iran. And they discussed their common goal, which was to destroy the Jewish people. And so they spied on the British at the time, and so on. And anyway, you have to understand that this is a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking about the world. Now, the Jews are just, for that type of thinking, the sages say this, they're not the only goal, but they're more like the canary in the mine. right? You know what the canary in the coal mine is. So in coal miners, there's a lot of gases that can be released. And when they're released suddenly when you mine, so you die. Because, I mean, a human being is a big creature, so it takes time, but if enough gases are released, then people die. So what they used to do was coal miners used to take canaries in cages down into the mine with them. And then when the canary stopped singing for some reason or whatever, they went and saw that it was suffocating or dying, they understood that was the old way to know, and they started running out of the mine until the gas would dissipate. So in that sense, the Jewish people are like the first place that or mostly the first place, and they will focus on us for some reason, and then we'll say why in a second. Not just some reason, there's a very good reason. And this cancer is as old as the world. It's that old, and when this happened in 1939, all the way through the end of World War II, it took the Allies a long time to understand that there was no way to bargain with it. It took them a long time to understand this. They thought they could come to agreements, which is why Chamberlain went and said peace in our time and all that stuff, and Stalin fell for the same trap again, exact same thing. And they couldn't understand in the beginning why anybody in their logical mind would do something like this until they began to understand that this is not logical. There's no claim behind it. It's not like, oh, I'm going to gain something from it. There's no interest in gaining anything. That's why it's so difficult to deal with it. So the Torah says very simply that you have to wipe it out. It's like cancer. You can't make a deal with it. No deals. If I leave one of you alive, it'll spread again. So the Torah says, Timchet zecher Amalek, that you shall wipe out the memory of Amalek. What is the memory of Amalek? We'll say in a second what the Rebbe says about this. But you have to wipe it out, and it says very clearly, and Rashi quotes this on the Pasuk in Kiteitzei, it means from man to woman, from infant to suckling. Everything. And animals. We'll say why in a second. You can't even leave an animal that belonged to them, so that animal, we said it belonged to this thing. Why? Because it's about growth. You don't have to destroy their buildings, for instance. It's very interesting. The Rebbe asks about it. Why don't you have to destroy the buildings? But the answer is quite simple, and I think that buildings don't procreate. They don't create a line. They don't spread. But anything that has life and it abominates life in that way, even the animal, which belonged to them, so that animal has the virus in it. And if you let it propagate, it will spread. It's like, it's almost like, let's say that it's really true that corona really came from bats. I think it did originally until it went into the lab and then it spread from the lab. But it came originally from bats, it's almost no question. So are the bats evil? No, but they carry the virus. Whether I like it or not. I don't understand viruses enough to know exactly what these spiritual viruses are. But the moment that it's alive, it abominates life, you have to destroy it. You can't leave anything of it. And again, the reason is because it's not interested in anything. There's no understanding you can come to. There's no way you can. The only understandings it has are, again, I'm not strong enough now, I'll be strong enough later. So I'll wait a little bit. Go do your thing. And I'll go do my thing, which is prepare to die again. That's what they want. I, over the last few weeks, in general, was studying something, and then I said, should I bring it in or not? there's something called the pragmatic claim of, not pragmatic, maybe the moral, I was reading it in Hebrew, so I have to figure out how to say it in English. No, the moral, I'll look it up later. It's from Kant, actually. And he says something very interesting. I don't accept it in principle, but this is the Western world's moral system. And most of them don't know this. Like they'll never bring this up. But it's a very, very well accepted argument that he says that every person should act in such a way that they are willing to be in a world where everybody acts the same way. He says that's the basis of morality. If you universalize your own choices and you say, do I want to live in a world where everybody will choose the same? So what does that mean? Do I want to, for instance, live in a world where everybody lies? So that's a question of, should I lie or not? So if you say, no, I don't want to live in such a world, I want to live in a world where everybody speaks the truth, so of course you shouldn't lie. But there's what he says about his argument basically is that if you act in a certain way, you are proclaiming that you want to live in a world where everyone acts that way. What this means is, and again, if we apply it to Amalek now, we can better understand even another, just using it as another facet to understand what this is that the person who claims that the purpose of life is to die is expecting others to do the same. Right? That's their expectation. It's not just an expectation, they want that. So here you have a little bit of a double-edged sword. Because if I just go and wipe him out, so have I not given him exactly what he wants? Meaning that I've done his work for him. But the Torah says no. For this you need the Torah. The Torah says it doesn't work that way. It's true that that's what he wants. That's okay, give it to him. But make sure, and this is the important part, that there's nothing left. If you leave anything alive, it'll grow back. You have to think about it as a cancer. There is absolutely no other way to describe it. So this was all the bad side. And then we can go on because there's many more facets that the sages describe in Amalek and so on. So why are we the canary in the coal mine here? Why are we the victims here always?
They consider us a cancer.
Right, but not a cancer, but something else. they use the same word and they say yes, they too are unreasonably good, without any limit. They're there for life, even when it doesn't make sense, and that drives this type of thinking crazy. Like if it says, what is the only thing that can stand up to me? The only thing that can stand up to me is when someone is willing to have self-sacrifice for the good. That's the only thing that can stand in front of this. So when American soldiers went to fight in Europe in 1942, 3, 4, 5, they went willing to die. And that's what stopped it eventually. There has to be that willingness. If there's, but there again, the willingness was not exactly. They didn't have a choice. One would say. But in times of peace, the thing that they hate the most, that they can't stand the most, is somebody who's willing to be altruistic, to do good, without any reason. That is the thing that is diametrically opposed to this, and this is what we called the other pole. So there's this pole which is the abyss, and again, it exists even in each of us, because when they open it, you see it inside of you. It's not like just I'm afraid of something that happened there. It's like something that grips you inside and says, maybe life has no purpose. But then the only thing that can fight that is that life has purpose even when it has none. It's an unreasonable, illogical commitment to life and to good. It's something that can't be explained. Now, my argument is, I don't know, some people maybe could say whether they think it's right or not. My thesis is that everyone who converts to Judaism feels that about Judaism. That's what they catch.
Say that again?
That when somebody converts to Yiddishkeit, what they sensed is that here there is a commitment to good that is beyond reason. It's an all-out. We know that people are not perfect. That's not the question. Nobody converts into Judaism because they think all their neighbors are going to be nice to them. No, hope not. But what they sense is that in the end, this is what this is about. They understand that at some level, there's something here that this is the complete commitment to good, where there's you can't put it down, no matter what you do to it. Now, what do I mean, no matter what you do to it? I don't know, maybe the non-Seleucid Greeks, the ones who didn't fight us, were very good people. In the ones who lived in Europe and the ones who lived in Egypt, maybe they were all very, very good, positive people. I don't know. But they're not around anymore. They disappeared. Maybe the Romans were also, in general, positive. There's a lot of things from the sages that say that they're very positive. They built the world and so on. Maybe the Babylonians were actually positive people in some way. But none of them lasted. They didn't last. Why didn't they last? Because their commitment to the good is not strong enough. At some level, the forces of destruction destroyed them. They couldn't live up to whatever their ideals were. The reason that Judaism is still around after 3,500 years, even more than that now, maybe after 3,784 years basically since Abraham, is because there's something in our mind, in our psyche, that is constantly connecting to the heavens. And the heavens is it's the opposite pole from this abyss. It's this understanding that there's an unreasonable, illogical pursuit of good in life. And it doesn't matter what is done to you. So, is there any other people, I don't know, do you know of any example of someone who was destroyed so many times over, again and again and again, but didn't even become bitter?
But doesn't this have to do because of God?
That is God. That is the commitment to God.
Okay.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
When I say this illogical, that's faith. Well, what do I have faith in? I have faith in the good. And it doesn't make any sense, because look at what's going on around you. When the Kloisenberger Rebbe came out of the Holocaust, and he lost his wife and 11 children, and he's a 48-year-old man. So what would any normal person do? Nothing. How could they possibly do anything? But he built a whole new world with infinite energy. To say that he wasn't living with a manhole-covered abyss, of course he was. He had that abyss inside of him. He knew where it was, and he knew what it looked like, and he had seen Amalek in action in a way that we certainly haven't seen. But it's the same abyss. It doesn't matter. It's still the same. It's still the same cliff. You fall off it the same way. It doesn't matter if it's this big or that big. It's all the same. But he had the other pole to support him. And so that's what the sages say. They say that at the end of the exile there will be such another Haman like this, who will make us do tshuva. And the tshuva here is not the tshuva of the individual. It's the tshuva of saying that either we're going to build life together, or each of us will separately sink into this abyss, will fall prey to it. And see, those are the only two options. It's going to become like very, very black and white. Everybody talks about this. It's suddenly going to become black and white. The world usually is very complex. But suddenly the world is going to become very black and white. And this goes both ways. Meaning that we will awaken from this to better understanding and committing and connecting to our role as those who spread light and good. And whoever has already been sucked in by this cancer is going to reveal themselves as cancerous. That's what they're going to do. All over the world. They're going to show their face. And they're going to say very simply, we support this. This is exactly what we've always dreamt about in our dreams. Whether they could do it or not is a different question. Because sometimes people have fantasies. But to support it means that's where you belong.
But you're kind of seeing that today.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Not just kind of, I think.
No, you are seeing it.
Now the role of Jews everywhere in the world is to make this clear. People have to see this. They have to see, most of the world is floating around aimlessly, not knowing what in the world they want. And when you hear and death and slaughter and everything there, this abyss, and the other one is light and good, and it's as
Clear as day.
mythological as you want. It doesn't get any more mythological than this. Like, it's just so clear. And how do you spread goodness and light and so on? So we all know how to do that. We've done that for many millennia, but now comes the time that in yourself you have to do this more. That's why this is an amazing thing, that every time that something terrible happened in Israel, there's never been anything as terrible as this, but every time that something negative happened, you'd see many, many people volunteering and doing things, and now you're seeing, I don't know, like 50% of the population going out of its house, out of its way, to do something. Everybody's doing something. Everybody wants to feel that they're doing something good. Nobody can stand aside. And that's the only remedy that there is to this abyss. You have to embrace that. You have to grab hold of the heavens in this case. And if you don't, you'll be sucked into the abyss eventually. And not as, God forbid, that you will do anything. You'll be sucked into the abyss, you'll fall over the cliff. Because it's such a powerful hole that's been dug in everyone's mind that life is like not worth living. So the only way you can handle this is to go up to the other pole. You have to embrace the other pole. Every Jew has to understand that what's being asked of me now is also for my mental health. Is to do good. I have to do good somewhere. And the world will say, how can you do good after something like this has happened to you? And we say, because we understand this is the only option. There's no other option to fight this. Internally. That's the way you fight. There's no other way. Apart from that, there has to be the complete eradication of this cancer. But that's not what each person has to worry about. But whoever is in a position to do that. They have to understand that. There's different parts to society. But most of the people have to hang on strongly. They have to find that pole within themselves that goes up. That pole of light, that pole. It's a reverse abyss, if you want. In the same way that you can fall down and it's an infinite fall, you understand that you can go up infinitely high. Those are the two forces inside of us that we have to balance. The only way to balance them is, the only way to live now with having seen this abyss is by aspiring up into that infinite goodness. That's the remedy. Anything else will leave us traumatized, in fear, unable to trust ourselves, wondering whether we should leave, wondering whether we should do this or do that. Or as the sages say, Amalek, not sages, but Baal Shem Tov said, Amalek is doubt. That's what he wants to instill in you, that you doubt everything. You can't count on anything. You can't count anymore on the police, you can't count on the army, you can't count on Hashem. Even Hashem, people ask this, where's Hashem? Why isn't Hashem? Okay, it's a good time to ask. You want to ask the question, ask it any time you want. Good thing to ask. Ayeh mekom kvodo. Where is this place of, where does he reside, as it were? It's a good question to ask. They don't mean it like that. They're not searching for Hashem. They're questioning Hashem. It's a doubt. It's a doubt about whether the good is real, whether life is real, whether it's purposeful, whether it has meaning, and so on. That's what this abyss does. It's a tehom. It's infinite. If you don't awaken to the infinite powers of goodness that it shows you, then eventually it will start making you doubt. If not already, right away when it opens up. You know?
We still need to reach part of that 50% that's not buying into it are the ones on the fence that don't know what to do. They're not volunteering. They're not sure what to do. They're the same people that don't go to classes of Torah Nefesh that we have to reach. Maybe we can't, let's leave the evil to somebody else.
Right.
No.
I said without question.
To get out.
Right. We're too old to go eradicate the evil. Even I am too old already. But
so it's a question. How do we do it? How do we reach these people?
It's all about getting this message out, in my opinion. And
are you sure Los Angeles is the place to go do it?
Oh, it's one of the places where I don't know if people are awakening.
Yeah, but
no, but I feel that this is a world effort. This is not something that is just here.
If we don't do it here, it won't matter.
So I think that
I think it matters all over the world.
People have to understand the two sides of this. One, which is, again, it has to be eradicated. In America, for instance, I don't think any Jew needs to hunt these people down. It should be the FBI that hunts them down. In France, they decided that anybody who shows support is now going to be deported. Okay, we'll see if they actually stand by it. One of the places it's been, this is a whole topic in and of itself, one of the places it's been most supportive of this is Germany. Mm-hmm. Because when you have the cancer and you've been cured, you understand. Mm-hmm. I didn't know about this. Has anybody here been in Hamburg ever? So everybody knows that Dresden was the worst firebomb or bombing in World War II, but it wasn't. It was actually not even close to Hamburg. And also, people tend to think, 90% of the population was this. There's no such thing in the world. Even in Hamburg, we're talking about 20% of the population was killed. But they have a museum, apparently, for a particular week or 2 weeks in which it was bombed without. There's no such thing as a fire bomb itself. It's just that you create so many fires and then you add a bomb, and then the bomb spreads the fire like it's some kind of firebomb. So there was a certain week where, I can't remember his name, there's a British captain or whatever who was responsible for bombing Germany, who decided that they had to destroy Hamburg. And so now they have a museum in Hamburg, and amazingly, there's the whole story, and it starts with a quote that most people, I don't know if it's translated there into English, but it's in German, and it's the verse that says, "And the people of Sodom were very, very bad in God's eyes." That's how they describe their ancestors. And they say, thank God that somebody cured us. Imagine, it's like, that's exactly what, the body feels after you give it, you give it chemotherapy, apparently. That thank God that somebody gave me this carpet bombing to get this out of me, because how else am I going to heal? And then you say thank you to the doctor who made you feel so sick, because he saved you in the end. So that message, that has to be, we sometimes we doubt their intent, and sometimes we doubt their sincerity, but I have no question that, I don't know what they're like now, but that it's the lesson was so deeply learned by them, that's why they're acting the way that they're, with zero tolerance now to anybody who's supporting anything like this, which is an amazing thing. It's one of the, this is like something that it should be studied in every school of psychology and of warfare. I don't know if it is. I didn't hear about it until last week. I didn't hear about this museum in Hamburg until last week. So there is the people like in the United States, the FBI or whoever needs to take care of this. But the lesson for the world has to be that, back then Nazi Germany was just Nazi Germany. It wasn't Nazis in the United States. It wasn't Nazis in Britain. If they were spies, and they knew how to take care of them. What you've done is, whether you meant well, you didn't mean well, it doesn't matter. What you've done is you've given this cancer culture to grow on in every single Western country. And if you don't get rid of it now, again, we're just the canary in the coal mine. In the end, you are good people, like the Rebbe called the United States a kingdom of loving kindness. You have good intent. You don't always do it properly, but you have good intent. You want to do good. It will come for you, and it's not a mistake that they recognize you as the great Satan and us as the little Satan, because they understand this. So, that's the duty, I think, today of Jews in the United States. There's 5 million Jews. They need to wake up to this. And not to say, oh, we're afraid. You're not doing it because we're afraid. We're doing it because we're the only ones who have survived long enough to understand what this evil is like. Everybody else has been wiped out. There's no Persians from back then to come and tell us what Haman did to Persia afterwards. There's no one in Greece to say it. There's no one in Rome to say it. There's nobody to say it. They're not here anymore. But this cancer is all over. It can be anywhere, and we know it's very simple. The moment it lifts its head, everybody who's for it supports it. At least when they're not afraid to anymore. So that's why this message has to be global. It's not just here, but. Again, for us who have gone through it...
But if we don't come through, who's going to do it in the rest of the world?
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. We will come through, and the question is whether the rest of the world will prevent us from happening to themselves also.
You said before that they don't understand, the Westerners really don't understand this evil.
Most of the Westerners. If they understand satanic cults, then they can understand it, because it's very similar.
So do they have the capacity to grasp?
No, that's why we're the only ones who
We can do it, but how do we
remember this.
How do we get through to them?
Hopefully, when you explain that there are two poles in the psyche, and people who fall into that one are going to come to destroy the world for the sake of destroying it. They're not looking for a better world. And they see that that's what they're doing. It makes no sense. If you wanted to gain territory, right? If that was your goal, like any, call it warfare, I don't know what it's called, like normal warfare. So why would you do something that would force your enemy
it did seem
to decimate
only
you?
God did that.
Doesn't make any
Only
sense.
God did
But that only makes sense when you understand that they worship the death itself. It's not for any goal. And people make the mistake of thinking, oh, life is not worth it for them to live. That's an interesting argument. Life is not worth it for them. That's exactly what
But
they're
they blame us
saying.
for making it not worth it.
No, and they,
Kept them-
no, and the point here is that what they're saying is, it's exactly correct. That's what they say. Life is not worth living. Not just for me, for you, for anyone. It's not a statement about their living conditions. It's a blanket statement about life. Life is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever it is, we have to strike it out. That's how they're thinking.
Can we teach this in schools?
Yes, I think it has to be. That is Amalek. That's what Amalek means. There's another thing about the word Amalek. We'll end with this. Amalek, one of the meanings is, apart from decapitation, which is what it means, strangely, it also means, it's also from the same root as a, what do you call those, like a leech, aluka. And the thinking here is that this spreads, and wherever it takes a hold, it leeches off the body that it connected to. That's why I said that the Arabs Sunni Arabs especially, I think, are more immune to this than the Shiites for some reason. Well, there's all kinds of reasons we might give, I don't know. But the moment that they leech onto a society, they will destroy that society with them. They're not interested. That society is just something that they're going to use in order to get their goal, which is to just, in other words, put it this way, they enjoy showing, that Jews never show they're dead. Never.
Never show
They're dead. Ever. You cover it came from us, this whole idea. That is something that it is improper to efface the person who's passed away. And so Jews have this whole thing that we can never show anything. What's the one exception? The one exception is that if Amalek does it, you have to show the world. You have to explain to the world, this is what they do. And even then, people cringe, they can't do it. And they hold back, and they're right to, because you can't show death. Because, why? Because if you want to create a world with life, how can you show death? Doesn't make any sense. So we know that everybody will pass away in the end, and that's the way of life, and so on, and life here is temporary, and so on. But we don't think about that. We don't live our life thinking, okay, since I'm going to die anyway, life is purposeless. It's not how we live. We say, put that in the back of our head, and we live, and we increase life all the time. There's one of the simple reasons or proofs for this is that our fertility rate only goes up, it never goes down. Why is that? Because fertility is a belief in life. But somebody would say, but they also have a high fertility rate. But ask them, why are they having children? They'll say, because I need another death dealer. That's the way they see it. They're not saying, oh, I want another person to add light into the world. I want another soul in the world. They're saying, I want to have another soul because this is the way that I will create more chaos in the world. This is the only way I can do it. Because I'm not as smart as you. I don't have your technology. What do I have? I have a womb. That's what I have. They say this. They say this openly. It's not like some kind of secret doctrine that they hide somewhere. They say this in the most open way. So again, the idea is that the only way that you can really fight this, first of all, internally, is to cling to the other pole. And the other pole is infinite goodness. It's infinite light. It's to do goodness wherever it is. Doesn't matter. Without reason. Without cause. What we call ahavat chinam. Just pure love, just for the sake of loving people. Just for the sake of being able to help someone. You have to have that, because when the abyss is open, that's the only thing that's going to hold you from falling in. Later on, once it's covered, so it depends on how prominent it was in your life. In fact, we would say that the people like the Kloisenberger Rebbe, who had, it wasn't a manhole, it was more like, I don't know, like Dover cliffs, that he had to cover somehow. And so then he dedicated his life in such a way to doing good for others, that in a certain sense that was the only way he could survive. That is what survival meant, because otherwise you lose faith in everything. I'm not saying that he's a weak person who doesn't have values anyway. He had these values during the Holocaust, he had them afterwards. But he also had a person who had the psychology. And he had to do a lot of good. The same thing holds by us. That's the way to fight this, and to make this known to people. When you volunteer, it's not just an act of solidarity, it's not just an act of, this is your health. This is your psychological health. You have to have this. And again, the sages say that this is why God even does these things. To bring this out, to bring this pole out, because this pole has been missing. It's not that people weren't dedicated to good. Everybody had something they were doing. But it has to go above and beyond. When I was discussing with Rav Ginsburg about whether to go next week or not. So first of all, another student of his actually went last week. He had a ticket for Sunday to Thursday. And so he called the Rav up Motzei Shabbos and said, what do I do? Do I go tomorrow or not? He said, of course you go. Of course you go. Because the main thing is that you have to, whatever good you plan to do, you have to do it. And what about my family? So that's your holding on to the other pole. So I had the same conversation with him. That's how I learned about this. And he said, of course, because even though you feel very uncomfortable, and of course everybody wants to be with their family at a time like this, they want to protect them and be with them, and even if they can't protect them, whatever, just because it makes some kind of vague sense in the mind. He says, no, but if you decided to go and spread Torah somewhere, you decide to go and spread the Torah in different places, you have to stick by it. You have to continue doing your shluchus. You can't stop. I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm just telling you that it's, like I kept talking to the people in LA about coming, not coming. I said, look, I'm being torn apart, but it has to be done. I can't. So unless there's no flights, I'm coming. To tell you that, I'm sleeping easy. No, I'm not sleeping easy, and it's not, and I don't know what it's going to be like when I'm there. But that's how you hold on. That's the pole that you have to connect to whatever you have. You have to do more.
You're another soldier. You're leaving your family.
Again, in a certain sense, again.
You've got to do it.
But again, I'm saying this is something that in regular times will not come out in me, right? And this is what Hashem wants us to bring out.
That's why we may have to flatten Gaza and kill the hostages.
Again, it's not my problem. I'm not in the army.
I just asked, you said it's not our way to show dead bodies. What are your thoughts about what's going on in the media right now? They're choosing to show the worst of the worst. What do you think about that?
Well, the media does what it does. I can't handle I can't stop the media. The question is, somebody has to make the decision whether to show the face of those who are killed or not. And again, there's a lot of discussion of this. There's a Mishnah about this, actually. It says that we'll never show the face of someone who's deceased, except for someone who was killed for being a Jew. And it doesn't say it exactly like this. It's Ha'ugei Malchut. And there's a lot of discussion about it, whether it's proper or not proper, in what situation or what. And I think that the bottom line is, if I remember correctly, this was something that we, about 20 years ago, there was a particular person who was brutally killed by Arabs in Batain, and there was a decision made, not be, well, it doesn't matter what the whole situation was, and the decision was made that even though the only way to be able to bury him, because again the situation was so horrendous, I don't even want to talk about it. The only way to do it was that they had to take him with his face revealed. It doesn't matter what the circumstance was. It wasn't necessarily that the face was mutilated. It was like regular, but there was a whole discussion, and in the end, they received a ruling that they have to do it that way. Even why? Because there was a real danger at that time that the Arabs would take this as a success, and there would be more killings afterwards. And so, from what I remember, the discussion centers around whether this will, whether this will serve in some way to prevent more death. Only if it does that. Meaning, it's not enough just to say, "Oh, I want to show that a Jew was killed." It has to actually serve this purpose that it can affect others to stop more killing. That's what I remember from that discussion from 20 years ago, and I haven't, so I don't know exactly what they're showing and what they're not showing, but if they're showing it, I have a feeling that it is causing, I think it's causing more support for us than for the other side. Yeah, because again, you have to remember that the other side, when it sees this, it says, "Wow, I can do that." It's almost like you don't talk about suicide because it causes people to. But I think that in the overall weighing of what's happening, that it probably serves more good than bad. But I don't know.
The question is whether it's weakening us and the soldiers or strengthening them to go out and do what they have to do.
Good question. I don't know.
One of the things they did say, like on Instagram, they were saying, I think it was the IDF, someone in Israel, they said you should not share these photos or any of the stories. That was doing negative instead of positive. And like, I saw 2 seconds of a video and I just said, I will not look at any of this stuff. I don't need to look at it. And I had someone at my house and they said it was actually, they kept looking for these stories, and it was, she said, she's 29, she said it was like an addiction. I could not stop
it has a
looking
name.
at it. And then she would not leave she was just visiting, and her plane was canceled, every plane ticket that she got was canceled, and she said she would not leave her house to go anywhere.
Right. First of all, this is when it comes from the negative side, this is actually a type of psychological problem that some people have, that they want to see. It has a name. It has a name even.
She said it was like an addiction. She said it was as if that this was my drug and I was addicted to looking at it. And finally, we had a long discussion. I said, you just can't look at these things.
Right. And this is what we call looking into the abyss. You actually look into it. I mean, it's bad enough that you have it, that you experienced it, that you went through it, but to actually go and look at it makes it 100 times worse. And to get out of that, you have to. The only way that you can stay mentally stable is you really have to connect to something very, very positive.
Right, I agree with that.
So, we believe Jewish people have an Neshama, Chelek, Elok, Animal. We're connected to the infinite goodness and the life and the light. This whole satanic Amalek line, is it inculcated in them? Like, are they born that way? Is it genetic? Is it generational? Like,
So that's what we said. Amalek used to be a people, and then you would say it's genetic. It's something that's
But are they connected to this bad God like we're connected to the good God?
yes. They want to destroy it. They want to destroy the world just as much as we want to heal
They
it.
must have a spiritual connection to that.
They were
God.
born in a different society and had different circumstances
matter.
and exposure. Like
I think it has a lot to do with society. I think that most of it is today Amalek that is a spiritual thing. It's not a genetic thing.
It's like our spiritual thing. It's exact same thing.
But
as
in
ours.
certain societies are more susceptible to this.
Well,
If you have a society that anyway allows what they call honor killings or things like that, and you come and you have to you have a society. One of the most interesting questions here is, why doesn't the Torah openly talk about a afterlife? Why doesn't the Torah openly talk about the world to come, the reincarnation, and resurrection of the dead? There's no open place. Afterwards, the sages find all kinds of hints, but it doesn't say this openly. Why is that?
Because you might long for it.
Because if you misunderstand it, again, you can understand it properly. It's like saying that what is equal for everyone? Equal for everyone is something that's been published. Everybody can read it and hopefully understand it. That's the Torah Shabbat. That's the written Torah. Everybody can read it, and just by reading it, however even you misunderstand it, you're in a good place. You've still done the mitzvah. But when you have topics that the Torah doesn't discuss, and it says, I'll discuss this, it's like you say, let's discuss this after class. It's because I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying. So things that are very delicate, like what is life after death, what does it mean that there will be a resurrection, and so on, the Torah did not discuss openly, only by the sages. Why? Because these are things that they have to be studied one-on-one. I have to make sure that you understand what they mean, that you don't misunderstand them and go do something such as longing for death. Somebody says, "Oh, I long to be in the Garden of Eden." You don't long to be in the Garden of Eden. But it's such a good place. You don't long to be in the Garden. There's no Garden of Eden in the Torah. You tell them. There's nothing. Show me where it is. It doesn't say this anyway. He said, but I heard about. Oh, you heard about? Okay, let me explain to you exactly what it means. And why you have nothing to look for there if your life has not been meaningful. So if you can't find meaning here, you're not going to find any meaning there. Period. You need to hear that sentence. But if I write it down, I don't know what other theory you might have and how you will misunderstand it or whatever. I have to do this one-on-one. There's certain things that just have to be taught one-on-one. So again, today, there's no stopping anything. Everything's out there. So you hope that the person hears the right explanation. But originally, these things were not discussed. It's exactly what happened in Christianity. There was an unwritten doctrine called resurrection, and a bunch of people misunderstood this, and then came and said, oh, this is the proof that someone is a God, or someone is a part of God, or whatever else. Complete misunderstanding of the whole thing. They don't understand what resurrection is in the first place. If they would see the resurrection, they wouldn't recognize it. Because they have this very childish, almost comic picture of what resurrection is. And the same thing, a person, when you hear these terrorists' description of the Garden of Eden that they're going to, they call it Jannah. It's like 2-year-olds. It's like 2-year-olds. They don't understand. They don't understand the first thing about anything. But that's their mind, and so this was adulterated by their culture, and it makes you susceptible to becoming a death dealer. That's what happens. So these things, that's why we were always, it says even, that that's the reason why you can not teach. It says originally it was forbidden to teach non-Jews the oral Torah. Because it would misunderstand it. Don't teach it to them. They don't need to hear about these concepts. Okay, anyway.
Can I ask, I wanted, when you started out and you were talking about Maslow and going towards these boundaries, is it the same thing as what Effie was talking about when did you hear his last class?
No.
He talked about peaks. We go from peak to peak,
Right.
and he made it sound like it was either a good peak, a bad peak, and you didn't know which one you would be, and you just keep on compromising, and you ending up not anywhere. And that reminded me of what you said, that those are the poles, these peaks. You go day to day, and if you really want to change yourself, not to, that that's what
It's more day to day.
If you want to, I just sent it to the Torah Nefesh. If you want the link to listen to his class, it's really good on a personal and to help yourself change. And
here, I really feel that what we are experiencing is not individual. I mean, each individual carries it, but the level of these energies is not like something that any individual would have normally within them.
But all of us want to know what we can do to help ourselves.
Right.
Everybody
So
wants
it's connecting to that pole, to that pole that's called heaven, and understanding that I can do a lot of good.
It's not easy to take that stand because it's an
Because
extreme.
the abyss is pulling you down, and yet you have to take that like doing things that make no sense. I have 10,000 shekels in a bank account, and I'm going to buy 10,000 shekels worth of clothing to give people whose houses have been burned down and somehow survived. Why? Because there's no connection to anything.
Right. Altruism.
But, I have a question. What about the splits of all these places asking for donations and trying to discern which is legitimate and that's really going to go to where the need is? Because I'm just getting tons and tons of emails asking,
So
emergency needs.
I never give a donation to anyone who I don't know personally, and I don't know what they do with the money myself. And that forces me to actually, if I think that something is interesting, it actually forces me to go and take a trip and figure out what in the world they're doing.
That's okay. That's a good idea.
And I think that's otherwise donations become like a lidocaine. It's like something that puts you to sleep because you don't really have to do anything. It's the easiest thing in the world. I'll just push a button and I'm finished. No, I have to be part of what this thing is doing. I can't be just, I'm not a bank. I'm a person. So as a person, I need to find out, what is this? Do I like the people there? Maybe they do something that's really nice, really good. I don't like them. Okay.
Also, I want to make sure that the majority of the money, I want to make sure that the organization that I am giving to is using the majority of the money
For what they say.
for what they say, instead of like some organizations, they're keeping 50%
Right.
and using 50%. They say this is the price of running, whatever. I want to know that the majority of the money I'm giving you is going to that. Unless it's something that, let's say, my grandchildren or my children are collecting for.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're giving to them.
Well, kind of. Because they get prizes at school.
Tzedakah was meant to be given face to face to the person who's going to use it.
I thought
And sometimes I can't. Sometimes I can't for whatever reason. I send a messenger or send someone else, but I still have to have direct contact with what it is.
Also, tzedakah starts in your house. If you have people in your house struggling, you should give to your family first, and then your community, and then to all your.
Okay, I have to go.
So